Dumelang Abusheni. Welcome everybody from all around the world. You're welcome on this podcast, God's Design, the Family Blueprint. So, on this program, we tackle all issues that affect family and that go against what the Lord has provided for as a family. A family is a unit made up of um, a men and women and children if they are children. So that is God's way of family. And the beginning of times, the Lord created a man, and once He created a man, He created a woman as a support for them. And when we read the Bible, you hear that a man knew his wife, and now they started a family. And that is God's family blueprint. But now we have seen families being diluted. A whole lot has been brought into the family structure, which is not God's way of family. So we have this podcast to tackle all those issues, and we believe that from policy to policy implementation to just people living on the streets, that they go according to God's blueprint, God's family blueprint, which is God's design. So once again, my name is Pastor Miboni, and you're welcome. I have a very special guest with me, and today his name is Sizwe Twala. You are welcome to this podcast.
Thank you very much, Pastor Ma, for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. So today we are tackling a very important topic. It's about education. We are in the education sector. So we're looking at the impact of education on family, particularly from the perspective of you being um, a parent, but also a teacher who's involved in the sector,
Yes.
in the education sector. So there's a lot that happens that impacts on family. Um, we can't just look at family in isolation. You know, we within families, you have parents who go to work, they get impacted by the work environment. Within the family structure, you have children who go to school, they also get affected by what is happening in schools. And any other sector of society
Yeah.
has a way of impacting family. So, my first question to you is for you to share with us your experience as both a parent and an educator. How do you think um, your role as an educator influences your parenting? You are both, so
Yes.
let's look at how your role as an educator influence parenting.
Well,
The God's way
yes,
also.
yes,
Because you
100%.
are a God's man.
100%.
So talk to us about that.
It's in the beginning it might have seemed like a very tricky path to be on, especially when you have to separate yourself from being a parent at school. Because with me, my daughter is in the same school that I'm in, and not only is she in the same school that I'm in, I'm a PE coordinator at my school, so I take her for phys ed as well. So it's something that you have to be very conscious of because you have other learners around who also look up to you. Because what has started to happen, fortunately or unfortunately, in both, you can look at it in both ways. What has happened is teachers have had to take on more than just being a teacher. So, for me, on a personal basis, I need to be able to keep my professionalism going, also being very conscious of not being too hard on my daughter within that same space as well, but also having to understand that I am a father too, so that you cannot separate yourself from that, unfortunately. I remember there was an incident whilst we were at school, and some other kids came to me saying, my daughter was being bullied. Those are the last words that you would want to hear, because now you are put to the test. It's almost as though now it's time for you to feel. You know, you are. I'm considered a disciplinarian at my school, so with that, you have to be very careful not to be too personal on that level, and still be able to maintain a level of discipline with it. Needless to say, I was able to handle it. And funny enough, when I did, what happened is, I don't know if it's because the boy knew that she was my daughter. He went and reported to the parents. And now I found myself having a parents' meeting with the mom and the dad. But fortunately, as I say, if your record speaks for itself, we could speak and also iron out some things, because the relationship between teacher and parent is very important, especially when it comes to learners not carrying stories or exaggerating whatever it is that might have happened. It's very important that you have an open relationship with parents so that they have an understanding of that. Yes.
Oh, that's great. So let's just look at that role that you are playing. So what do you think is the most significant impact of education on family dynamics? And from your perspective as a Christian, you know, you have seen a lot happen in schools. We have heard a lot about what is happening in our schools, particularly here in South Africa, where, you know, the preaching of the gospel or teachings, you know, like that, or SCMs as we used to know them, you know, or preaching at assemblies. You know, understand most schools have not been allowing that to happen in the school environment. You know, so what do you think has been the impact of that? It could be perceived. We just had last week, you know, one of the executives from the Department of Education who was sharing with us that that is not what the law says. So the law has never said we take out Christianity from schools, or the preaching or the sharing, you know, of the gospel from schools. But from where I'm sitting, you know, it might be a function of, you know, people not really understanding the plans of the deep state, because they normally hide different things in policy. So you think, no, the policy is upright, so we give permission, or we give all the responsibility to the school governing bodies to determine whether the gospel can be shared in the school or not. You know, so you being in that environment, you know, looking at your school and many other schools around you, so what has been the impact of education on family dynamics from the Christian point of view?
Oh, as far as that is concerned, like you say, there's very few schools that actually allow prayer to take place when they have assemblies or before they start their day. And needless to say that the impact on that has been nothing but negative, especially on a family dynamic, because you actually find, because what it does is, when you bring prayer and Bible, scripture, unions into schools, it allows children to have some form of moral compass that allows them to be fully conscious of what's right and what's wrong. But because now there's less of that happening, what you see is that families themselves are struggling with discipline of their own children, because you will be sitting across a parent trying to make them understand the issues that you are having with a certain learner, and true to what you will hear parents say, I also don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the crux of it is that what is missing is exactly that. Because without prayer, without teachers being free, because like you say, when he says that, when that person says that it is not in the law to say that you cannot share. But the truth of it is practice. But the truth of it is you are still chastised when you do. You find that you are called to the side to say you must speak less of this, speak less of the Lord Jesus Christ, or not even mention the Lord Jesus Christ. You find that even when you say prayer, they say, just say amen, don't say in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. But the impact of that is you find learners who do not have the concept of consequence. And that goes hand in hand with the lessons that we learn as far as scripture is concerned, as far as the Bible is concerned, as far as waking your child up to go to school. Because what I think has been misunderstood as far as children's rights is concerned is that at the end of the day, you are still the head of the house as a parent. It does not matter whether they say if you discipline your child, because what we hear most of the time is that there was something very funny I heard from my workplace where we were told that, look, when you discipline a child, please make sure that you know you can't even pull a child or even brush up against the child in a certain way because you never know which parent will go and report at the department. But the problem is within the household itself. It's because of that lack of discipline that you find that children's results are going down. You find that we've got children who are in primary school who are already slicing themselves on the wrist because of the pressures they are finding outside. And when you finally have a child open up to you as to what is going on, you find that things on social media have more influence on them rather than what is going on in the house as far as their homes are concerned. So as a teacher, you find, like I say, educators have now had to take on more roles than just limiting yourself to being an educator, to even now wearing a hat of a psychiatrist because this child needs someone to speak to. And with the family dynamic post 94 and with what can we say, the booming of or the want of economic boom, you find more parents are pressured to be in the office than at home. So when a child comes home to an empty house. By the time you're asking for homework from a child, no, I slept late. By the time I slept, my mom was still not home. You're not putting the fault on the parents, but there's a lot of different pressures out there that have really attributed to the lack of discipline and low marks that we find in schools. So education on the family dynamic is very fundamental. And Christian values are a must because it constrains you from just living willy-nilly without consequence of your actions.
So, you raised an issue about children's rights, and I want us to dwell deeper into that. Is there a misunderstanding of what children's right is all about? And now even the children will tell you, if you discipline me in this way, I'll go and report you to the police. So this whole issue around children's right, is it being well understood? What is the right for the children? What should we be looking at? And why has it brought ill discipline, so much of ill discipline, so much of social problems with the learners, right now? People are excited, we have children's right, but we see less and less of the children becoming disciplined.
Yeah.
You know, the moral campus, like you are saying, is in most of the instances is close to none.
Yes.
You know, we see children stabbing teachers in schools, within the premises of the schools. Like everybody's running away from these children have become monsters.
Yeah.
You know, in our own environment. Is it a consequence of these children's right? Are we understanding what these children's right are all about? Do we need a debate about the children's rights? You know, what are we talking about, and what should be done with this, you know, big issue? I'll give you an example. Not so long ago, I saw a video clip of a high school student who was drinking beer in class in front of everybody else, and they were clapping. You know, so how did something like that happen in the school premises? You know, the person from the Department of Education that we had last week, he said, we are expecting too much from the educators. You know, where is the role of the parent? You know, the role of, you know, the different elements of society. So let's talk about the children's right. What is it? What are we talking about? And do we have an understanding of what it is? Is it misunderstood? Is it misconstrued? What is it? You know, and I know that it stems from, you know, what happened previously with corporal punishment.
Yeah.
You know, we're all excited about corporal punishment being taken away, you know, because of people who are abusing it. But what have we become now
Yeah.
as a society?
What we've become is a lawless society because there is no risk of punishment when, for lack of a better term, I say you misbehave. And like you rightfully ask, has it been misconstrued or misunderstood? You know, like the Bible rightfully says that my people perish for lack of knowledge, which is exactly what we've been witnessing right now. It is that lack of understanding of exactly what it is from both the department and from the parents and educators themselves. Because what you find, especially in a class, teachers feel they've got no protection from the department, whereas in children feel that they've got all the protection they need to do as they please. It's a very sad thing that you're talking about right now of a child drinking beer. I've heard of cases in some schools where children bring these hubbly pipes in schools
In a school
and
environment.
they sit during a lesson and have
Inside
those
the classroom.
inside the classroom. There's an incident which was also in the school of the South, where a learner a learner was fighting with the teacher, and then to retaliate, because now the teacher felt like he was being ganged up on, because now it was a lot of learners going for him. He picked up a chair and threw the chair at the child. So the child had to, the child was suspended, rightfully so in this incident. But because I know that boy personally, I actually asked him what happened. And when he explained to him, I said to him, but what right did you have to retaliate to an adult? Because at the end of the day, I always say to children that I come into contact with, when it comes to respect between adult and child, there's no level of adult must earn respect from a child. That's where we lose it. Because the moment the child feels like that, that's where you will have incidences where a child thinks that he can smoke as just as freely as he wants in a class, based on just the right that says a child has a right to education. Now, when they say a child has a right to education, and then a parent reports you to a department, you will find that in some districts they tell you that you've got no right to kick a child out of class. But now, at the expense of, let's say you've got 38 kids in a class, now at the expense of one child, 37 children must suffer, and a lesson must not continue, because this one child knows that you've got no powers to kick them out of the class. And then you decide, okay, I will ignore this child And what do? They make sounds in class. You can't teach in such an environment. Now, every time you reprimand this child, it's time gone. Say, for instance, a period is just an hour. So, when it comes to the rights of children, hence I say, by the department, by the parents, and by the children, it's misunderstood. You are correct to say, Ma, that a debate needs to be had so that it can be corrected to say, what about those children, those 37 children whose rights are being infringed upon? Because now you're saying we must stand up for one child's rights while we infringe these other one's rights to education as well, because we cannot kick this one child out of class. And mind you, kicking a child out of class does not necessarily mean that you neglect the child completely, because in most cases, a teacher will give a child the work that must be done. All you are saying is, in this environment, in this space right now, because you are not willing to listen, you need to take some time out. Because, like you say, we were all excited when corporal punishment was taken out. But for people such as myself, I'll speak for myself personally, and there are like-minded people like that, we still feel that was the biggest mistake that could have been made. Because what you find, unfortunately, with our education system, it's always something that we see something happening in one country, and then we decide we're going to bring it into our country as well. You look at states like, countries like the US, UK, or your Nabo Island and what have you. There's absolutely no discipline. A child can walk, like just about a week or two ago or so, we had another shooting in the States by a child. And it all stems down to that, where children are protected by these rights, but then at what cost? So there needs to be a sit down and a re-evaluation of these, so that it can be maintained. Like when we were brought up to say a child is a child and an adult is an adult. If two adults are in the room and you are sitting and you're watching TV, once they start talking, you know you need to leave the room. You are not asked for permission. Whereas in today, you find that there are parents who are not sure. They feel that, no, we can speak. But the danger of that is it makes a child think that they're at the same level as the children, which now brings that level of misunderstanding. To say that when a parent speaks or an adult speaks, yours is to listen and do, not to be negotiated with. Because children's rights does not accommodate for negotiation between adult and children. So yes, there's children's rights to say the rights to safety, the rights to education, and with those we understand that, like Mari was saying, that there were people that would misuse corporal punishment. But to this day, if you look back, the cases of that happening were far less than what is happening right now with the disruptions that we have within our youth, where you will find a young boy who's 13 walking around with a beer bottle in the streets instead of being at home. There are after hours where because...
And even just as you are saying it, even parents, like as we meet those children on the street, we don't, parents don't feel they have the right to even reprimand anybody's child. Whereas when we were growing up, you knew you will not even do that, in front of your neighbor.
Yeah.
Who's an adult.
Yeah.
So you needed to respect and honor. So right now, that is not even there.
Those principles are not, they're not followed anymore. Like Pastor always says that every child is your child. You knew, I grew up in a colored community, and if I see my friend's dad, automatically it was Uncle Mang Mang or Auntie Mang Mang, because that was the level of respect that we were required to give off as children. But today, that's non-existent. People don't even reprimand kids who come into a shop and buy a cigarette. Like, what are you doing? You are underage. go and call your dad or your uncle to come and buy it themselves. That's what we used to experience coming up.
And look at us, we are better people.
100%.
From coming from that system.
Yes.
And just as you are saying this is, I'm just looking at the whole issue of policy and how policy is developed. Oftentimes there are what is called the problem statement that informs policy. The problem statement would say there's corporal punishment, which is not good. Children, yes, there were children who were injured, from being beaten severely by their teachers. But when it comes to policy, so if rightfully, what you were saying is, it was a small percentage of, the extreme corporal punishment, which needed to be addressed. But then they put in 1% of the problem in society, or even 0 point something percent of the problem in society, and make it a policy, and make it a bill, a policy that everybody has to align to. And when it comes, it says no corporal punishment. But what are if you take away corporal punishment, what are the other strategies that parents, teachers should employ? So those provisions were not provided. They were not given. As to how, maybe I'm mistaken. Are there provisions on how to discipline children now in schools if corporal punishment was taken away?
The provisions that have been put in place are, how do I put it? Okay, there are provisions that have been put in place where you find that you can put the child up for detention, or there's something which we call a merit and demerit system. Now, a merit and demerit system, when a child is doing well, or a child is behaving, or a child is passing their subjects, so they get merits. But when a child is misbehaving, like for instance disrespecting a teacher, they don't have their homework done, then they have demerits. And once they've accumulated a certain number of demerits, what they then do is they get put in detention. But even with that, the debate or argument that has come up is with putting up a child in detention, are you also not punishing the teacher as well? Because you cannot leave children unsupervised, and detention would usually take place after school. Say maybe your school comes out at 2:30, and then maybe from 2:30 to say 3:30 or 3:00, that child will be in detention. So that's extra hours added to the teacher's working hours, when the teacher has been at school since 7:30, and then they still have marking to do, they still have assessments to come up with. So those measures have, well, it's the proof is in the pudding that they have not been effective as they thought it would be, because some children don't even, the truth of the matter
does
is
not
that
do anything.
they
In
don't
fact,
care.
if I was a naughty child and put in detention, I'll be happy.
Yes.
So you just get removed, you are there, nothing is happening. In my own high school, I remember that when you would be punished for just making noise, the issues that the children are doing now is like they are very big, they are mind blowing.
Yeah.
But just for making noise, we used to be now made to go and clean the toilets or scrub the floor, the whole block, and stuff. And nobody wanted to find themselves in that space. So now this one is easy. You just go in, we put in a room, you sit, after 1 hour, 2 hours, you go home. And what has that done? So in detentions, you have like one-on-one engagement with the child to show them really that what they have done is wrong, or if the child is just put in a room for an hour to remain in school, and what are the other supporting measures around children?
There's no guideline as to that I've heard of, because like when we are put on detention duty, no one has given you, like you say, a guideline to say, okay, whilst these children are in detention, this is what you should do with them. This is because at the end of the day, let's say we are talking about you are in the 4th term, the curriculum has ended. there's no homework to be done, there's nothing to be studied.
Mm.
So you would have to use your own discretion as an adult to say, this child needs guidance. I can talk to this child. Um, that's the, and because like we take it back to your children's rights and to um, these guidelines, because some people are so conscious of, I don't want to use the word retributions, but the consequence of speaking to that child. You never know what that child might misunderstand and take back home. And then when you are now sitting with the parents, you hear them say, "My child said you said this, that," and that time you were just trying to help the child because they are in detention, so that they don't go off the rails. They misconstrued what you were saying to them, and then you find yourself getting into trouble. So, to an extent, you can't really blame educators for sitting back. And that's also not an excuse to say that we must just fold our arms and not do anything, because that engagement is needed, especially when you find, because there are parents who travel a lot, man. And then only when you engage a child, you find that this child has been alone in the house for 4 to 5 days because the mom or the dad was gone on an overseas trip, which was work. And they were left things to do, they were left provisions for them to make it to the week. But this child has no guidance at home. They've got no one to speak to. They've got, even if, let's say, for instance, there is some form of bullying happening at home. Some schools still don't have psychiatrists in those schools for a child to go and speak to, and others don't feel that they can engage with the other teachers on that personal level to speak to them. Yeah.
Okay, let's get to the differences or different types of schools that we have now in the country. We have public schools, we have black schools, we have village schools, we have Model C schools, which most of them are private schools. We have public schools, we have private schools. I have seen a difference in behavior, depending on which types of schools people are going to. What is happening is something that is planned, that we see a lot of black students ill-disciplined. When you drive just out into the shopping malls and, taxis, you just find a lot of school girls, or boys just moving around like that. So why is that? I don't see a lot of white kids, for instance, all over the streets. Is it because of the means that they have within their families? Is it something else? Yeah. Or is it a planned strategy to get, young kids, children to remain where their parents were?
Sure. When it comes to Model C, and I don't know if we should still call them previously disadvantaged areas, you find that there's a lack of urgency from the top. The reason why I say from the top is that you find in a Model C school, when it comes to deadlines as far as your assessments, your tests, and your curriculum is concerned, the SMT members, the SMT is the school management teams made up of HODs, the head of departments of different grades, which they have from grade R to grade, well, I'll speak to primary schools. I know even in high schools they have as well, to grade 7. They all have HODs, people whom they have to report to in terms of their deadlines is concerned. Now, these are the supporting structure to the headmaster and the vice principal. Those people I've found in my working environment are very essential to a school that is functioning smoothly, a school that actually has discipline, and to learners who actually adhere to the rules of the school. Because with them, you don't have a principal who's up in his office not knowing what's going on ground. And with that as well, you have teachers who have an HOD that they can report to, and that HOD can make sure that they deal with this situation before it gets to, say, the school governing body and the principal. Now, those structures are essential to be kept to and to work well. And the school that keeps to those structures is a school that will function perfectly. But unfortunately, in our schools that we would say the Kasi schools, they're not kept to. That's the truth. There's no sugarcoating it. You find that even when it comes to marking of books, children not doing their work, they're not taken to task. Because with that, a child that does not do their work in a Model C school, and then the HOD is brought into place, and HOD will then sit with the child, with the school teacher, and then see what the problem is. If that does not work, the parent is called in. In fact, a letter is taken to the parent to say this is the problem. If the problem ensues, then the parent is called in to the meeting where they have subject meetings with the different educators that the child might be having issues with. Now, these resources are put in place to make it effective for the learners to have a productive educational system for them. But in our schools, where you find that teachers leave whenever they want because of a lack of motivation, for lack of a better word, and with as far as discipline is concerned, a child can just come and go as they please in classes. These are happening in those schools because the discipline is not kept to. And what happens is, I had an interesting chat with a friend of mine who's also in the education system. She said, look, you find that most parents take their children out of the location to the Model C school because they see exactly what's happening there.
But also the teachers themselves. So, I
Yes.
had one of the medical doctors who was speaking to people in parliament. He said, no, for us to have discipline everywhere and quality services everywhere, all the people who work for government, they must not be given medical aid. So they must go to public hospitals. So maybe we need to be looking at something similar, even in the public schools, so that
Their children go to
their
those
children
schools.
go to their own schools,
100%.
so they can put in more effort
Yes.
in what they are doing there. So
Because
maybe that's
it really does boil down to lack of effort. And even when you report it to that, because schools have different districts, so when you go to the district there, you find that the teacher you're trying to report has friends at that district. So nothing happens to that teacher, which in the end fails the whole system and actually collapses the whole system. That's where you find that even when the resources are made available, they don't get to the children. Why is it that in schools in the location, there's about 40 learners who are sharing a limited amount of textbooks? What happened to those textbooks? Because there is a budget that goes out for each district to say this is the amount of textbooks that are needed in a certain school for these learners. So when that is just allowed to happen, obviously the school system is going to fail with regards to that. That's where you will find that the gap between the Model C and the schools in the location will always be so far and wide, be it educational, be it sports-wise. And even within the sports, you find, because I'm very involved in the sports, you find that this age cheating thing. But what you don't realize is, what are you teaching that child? Because the child is aware that he's older than what he's supposed to be. And you allowed him to be in a young. So now you've given this child this certain kind of mindset. And now he's in this ecosystem where he grows up into the secondary school in the same location and becomes a norm. And then once he leaves the system, you can't do that in varsity.
So it's not only age cheating, it's also gender cheating.
Yes.
And, what I found out lately is that, some of these children, they are transgender, just for the sake of them, doing well in those disciplines. Like for instance, if you are playing a women's sport, and you are transgender, obviously you are going to have more muscle, more stamina, more. Maybe let's talk about that. Do you find? Let's start with boys and girls. That's the main reason why they are not mixed. It's because of the intensity of the power that they hold when they play those sports.
True.
That's the reason why they were
Yes.
separated. So, what do you think of instances where somebody is transgender? So it means their hormones are male. Is it male hormones? So do you find that happening now lately in the school environment? I've seen it happen in most of the countries. So it's age cheating, gender cheating. So what do you think of that? Is it happening in South Africa?
It has started
Yes.
happening in South Africa, unfortunately, where you find that, especially in the private school system, where there's certain schools that have these unisex toilets. So that's where you find that boys and girls can use the same because they feel that this boy who says that he's got or he feels that he's a girl cannot use the boy toilets. So it is slowly being introduced in the schools where you once you even speak against it, you are found to be what they say, well, they call it hate speech, or you're being homophobic. And so you are now expected to close your eyes to the truth, to accept what they are trying to introduce. And what, in essence, they are doing is actually attacking the family system with this. And the reason why they are introducing it in the school systems is so that it becomes a norm. Because once you grow up with something like that, when you become...
And the whole system
Yes.
accepts it.
Yes, so once you become of age, you don't find anything wrong with it because it's been in your eyes for so long. Hence, they are trying to introduce it first in the school systems, I mean the lower ranks as far as primary schools going up. They're not so... they're not as concerned about your business sectors and your varsities as they are indoctrinating learners in this, because what you do when you do that, Ma, is that if a child gets used to, let's say, a Sipo who now wants to be called Nolwazi because he feels that, no, if he's more in touch with his feminine side and he grows up to that. Do you understand that everyone who accommodates that and endorses that kind of behavior makes it a normality, even though it's not normal?
I am laughing. It's because in as much as people want to normalize this kind of behaviors, they are, on your face, it looks very fake. And I will give you an example. Somebody who's, you see, I'm a woman, but
Yes.
I don't speak like this.
Yeah. Yes.
So, but because they are not in their normal self, they do extra things. So you see that those ones who are men and they're trying to be ladies, they do extra, man. It becomes too much. Those who are girls and they feel they are more masculine, and they walk like this. They say,
and they
good
try and
morning.
speak with the
So
bigger voice. Yeah.
they do extra. And that basically shows that they are not themselves. They are doing things that are out of the norm, and it
Yes.
shows on your face. So the question that I have, really for you is, within the educational system, what are the debates, around these kind of issues? Educators debating these issues, are they concerned, or they're just walking with the flow? There's no problem with what we are seeing our society becoming.
It has not been made public yet,
Mm.
as far as educators are concerned. In their private corners, they might be speaking about it,
Mm.
but
Not only in terms of transgender, I mean, in
yeah,
terms of discipline, we have meetings, circuit, what do
yeah,
they call it?
district
The
meeting.
district meetings, provincial meetings to talk about, but we have a problem. What should we be doing at
Mm,
this stage?
mm. Well, when it comes to discipline, there has been a couple of meetings where they engage with the department
Mm.
as to what do we do going forward. But what becomes very evident is that there's not much support or effort you will get from there.
Mm.
Instead, what you will get from them is a form of managing, you
Mm.
know, to try and make you understand the ill discipline
Mm.
instead of actually giving the authority back to where it
Mm.
belongs
Mm.
as far as the educators are concerned. That's
Mm.
why you find that the teaching sector is actually losing a lot
Mm.
in terms of public schools because educators do not feel that they're getting the support that they need or require from the department. So you lose a lot of teachers because of that.
Mm. But I also think it's a key role for parents to play. I mean, yesterday I listened to a testimonial that was given, about Tabiso Sikwane,
Mm.
about how she was involved at every level
Mm.
in her children's schooling,
Yeah.
where every meeting she will be there and she will be asking,
Yes.
why are we only teaching these children this?
Yes.
Why? So the parents also need to really come up hither.
100%.
So if the SGB is the one responsible for that particular school, that is the school governing body. So it means the parents can also influence what is going on,
Yeah.
in the schools and not sit back. Most parents actually don't even want to participate in the school governing body, and that's where things go wrong.
100%.
When they are not there involved. So it's not about them involved in their individual children's lives, but it's about the betterment of the school, but also building a future,
Yeah.
for their own children.
Yes, ma'am.
So we need to instill that culture of their involvement
Yeah.
in these school governing bodies. So just one point that I want to raise around, which is something that I've observed. Um, you mentioned something earlier on about how you would not just address the person who's elderly by you would address them as uncle
Yes,
from
ma'am.
where you grew up. Something that I've seen. It's a function of culture.
Yes.
But since children have been going to these Model
Model
C
C
schools,
schools,
they are mixing with white people who address things differently. Like for instance, children will just call an elderly person like that by name,
Yeah.
and you shrink.
Yeah.
But now that has cropped into our children. They start calling people by name, and I'm just wondering because th- that is where the whole issue around respect comes from. Teaching our children, no, you don't greet people and say hi. It's very rude.
Yeah.
So what has been your own observation about the culture and how the culture is kind of changing, but it's moving more towards um,
You know,
ill discipline, lack of respect, and all of that.
when it comes to that, I would even say it's more the wanting of westernizing us as a society. Why I say that is this: I grew up in, I went to a school in the Free State, and when you speak to culture, when it comes to South Africa, across board.
Mm.
It's there. You know, be it, dare I say, a poor school, be it a location, be it a Model C school. Um, within us, it was engraved. We were brought up in that way, that an adult is an adult. When you see an adult, like for instance, when a teacher was walking up, whether they are coming to, you would have to stand until the teacher has walked by, and then you sit. Then you can continue with your conversation. If you come into a room and then everyone is seated and you as a child is seated, and an adult come in, regardless of color or creed, you know that when an adult comes in, you must get up. So, because of wanting to modernize ourselves and, as they say, be within your first world countries kind of setup, what it has done is that it has actually crippled our it has crippled that part of our cultural bringing up, which allowed for us to have that level of respect. Because now our learners or our children of today learn more from social media than what they do from at home, for instance. Because everyone wants to trend. Because now we grew up that even if you don't have sugar at home, you just go to Makelwane next door and you go with a bowl of sugar. That Ubuntu was understood. But today, everyone grows up in these high walls, and we've become so privatized that what you know in your own circle is what is everywhere else. So a child who disrespects their child, who disrespects their parent, has no understanding that that is actually wrong. So they bring it out to their school or to their friends, and when they see adults, they curse as freely as they want to, or they call their uncles based on their economic status, any way which they want to, because that also plays a role nowadays. We've got this thing where they always say there's the rich auntie. But with us, based on our cultural background, an adult is an adult. You give respect to an adult because that's the respect due to an adult. But today, those things are not emphasized anyway. And it's very important what you said, Ma, as far as I will bring it back to the education system, as far as parents and educators are concerned. When a child is called for a meeting and you know your mom is going to be there, on the offset, it should be that the mom or the parents and the teachers are on the same side, and the child must understand that. But now, today it becomes so easy to put them against each other that you lose the child, and that also plays a role within that cultural background, because I look down on you because I feel that education is such a low profession within the system of everything else, that even my child will not respect you. So it goes back to that we must start bringing these things back into our homes, back into our schools. When children greet a teacher, the whole class must get up and sit down, because then you are bringing back respect.
So I think also that something much more needs to be done with the teachers. In as much as people will say my role is to educate, but there's a bigger role.
Yeah.
The example that you are giving of you calling in a parent to come and address an issue with a child. Maybe we need to also look at, what are the processes around that. So because when you have not discussed a matter with the parent, and you come and meet a child just like that, without discussing, looking at all angles of the issue, how are you going to even approach the matter? For the child to know that they cannot, make one to be against the other. but also it requires, I don't know, maybe young people of today who are parents now, needs to be re-educated,
Yeah.
about values, about morals, about a lot of those things, because they are the problem now. If a child is disciplined, then the parent just quickly takes the side of the child. Say, no, 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 you can't do that to my child, and all of that. They are really, missing the point, So I think we need much more of engagement, especially between. I don't know what SGB meetings are all about, or parents' meetings are all about. I believe parents' meetings should not only focus on you. These are the results. The children have done well in this, but parents and teachers have these kind of debates and discussions around. This is what we are facing in the schools. And parents will say, this is also what we are facing at home. So how do we meet each other halfway, at that time so long? How do we discipline, and these things can be discussed to say, don't ever, even if your child is right, don't ever let your child to, you take the side of the child, even if the child is, that's how we grew up. That even if but my mom is being unfair, for what she has done. But by the time my dad comes into the picture, she agrees. They both agree and said, you were wrong. And that's how we got disciplined. So I think we need more engagement, and this should be driven by the department. I think in our future episodes, maybe you can advise us also on, the relevant people to speak to when it comes to these kind of issues. We had somebody who was talking here about policy. We know that we need to bring somebody to look at the curriculum, but I wouldn't even call it extracurricular. It's the main thing. When you have, the moral compass right, everything falls into place. So this is the main thing before even the education that you're talking about. What kind of leader are we raising? And you see this in political structures in parliament where, you even cringe. Like, how could somebody talk to a president like that? Or how could somebody talk to this man who is, you know, uh, three times their age? They just so ill. Discipline is everywhere. So there is much more that needs to be done, and these kind of debates really brings out a lot, for us to be looking at, and maybe we need to, further engage. But it starts with you in that school where you are at, to, you know, engage and call the teachers to look into these things and look at strategies to really make a better environment, for our children, and even bringing in, our parents. LO, I know that we are kind of running out of time, but maybe it's a discussion for another day. What is the content of LO? Is LO currently bringing out what it's supposed to do, bringing out the results we are supposed to have in there? What is the content there of? How is it delivered? I know it's a debate for another day, but in conclusion, and thank you so much for coming in, and it was really the bulb has gone brighter when it comes to the issues of education, and more ideas coming on how can we really deal with issues at this level. So just a few takeaways from our discussion, is around re-looking at the issues of policy, how policy is drafted, and how policy should not be, instead of enabler, so it disables everybody to really take on their responsibilities. Debates with the school governing bodies and the department to better the current situation. It is not good, especially in most of our black schools. And, how do we discipline our children to become better people in all environments, the school environment and the home environment. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. us, Brother Sizwe Twala, who was with us today, who's an educator, but also a parent in his child's school. Thank you so much. And God
Thank you
bless
very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have thank you.